Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Well, I'm delighted to welcome Steve Hooper from Inclusion Coaching to the show. Steve, welcome to the Talent Equation.
Thanks for having me, Stuart. Delighted to be here.
Good. Well, this is our second round, isn't it? Because we had a bit of a failed recording previously.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Technology is testing us, as it often is, but we're having another go using a different platform. So again, we are in the lap of the technological gods, but I'm glad we were able to put this together. My schedule's been bananas. You've been very patient waiting for me to be able to sort of re-record, but I do appreciate you having the patience to come back on.
No problem at all. It's an honour to be on, really, with some of the other guests you've had. To be even, working on something that is similar to what they're working on is brilliant.
Well, you've got an entire kind of sort of coaching program and business called Inclusion Coaching. So, I mean, you had to come on because, if there's anything that this particular podcast is all about, it's about coaching and it's about inclusion. So, you were definitely on the list to come on. So we've got a number of things to talk about, but before we jump into those, I wonder if you can give everybody your backstory. Tell us all about Inclusion Coaching and everything that you do.
Okay, if we start with me, I've been coaching since 2006. I was obviously bouncing around other jobs like people do, and I saw it come up. No kids of my own. Wasn't involved with the local club at the time, and just decided, I'll do my level 1. I'll see what it's all about and go from there. On my level 1, I met a guy from a local club, got involved with them, worked with them for 3 or 4 years. Obviously, completely new to it. The courses back then were very much, here's 20 sessions. We'll pick one for you to deliver. If you can deliver it and you can put bottles in a square, you get yourself a pass. There was very little on the course. But it allowed me to then go and coach. I then went on to do my level 2 in 2008 and had a really negative experience with that. Failed the course, not through lack of knowledge. It was, as we've spoken about before, Stuart, it was a real negative experience for me personally, which kind of led me to not want to do any courses anymore. So for about 30 seconds following that course, I'm thinking, right, I'm done with this. Can't do it anymore. Don't want to do it. 30 seconds later, I'm thinking, do you know what? I've picked up so much knowledge from the other guys on the course, from the educators, through the content of the course, that I thought I'll just go and apply this knowledge. And I'll work with the group of lads that I've got, which I think they were about under 12 at the time. I figured, I'll use it and I'll see if I can make myself better. Moving on from that, before 2010, I had been working at the local professional clubs, football in the community type thing, where they do like after school clubs and half-term camps and stuff. So again, working with lots of different children, different environments, working with different coaches all the time, having different sessions in different locations, all those kinds of things, dealing with not knowing how many were turning up at the session. So lots of variance within what we were delivering and how we had to deliver it. So I gained a lot from that over sort of 18 months. 2010, I set up Inclusion. The company that I was working for full-time in the recession disappeared. And on a Tuesday afternoon, I had the conversation, we're closing down. Goodbye. So I thought, well, what skills have I got from the job? what skills have I got from the football? Can I put something together and come up with something? Because I think when you're in a moment where you've got nothing, it's probably the best time to do something. So instead of just looking for another job, I looked at what I had and tried to put something together. We came up with inclusion coaching. I sat down, wrote probably an A4 sheet of paper about what I wanted it to be and why I wanted to do it. Went to the accountant of the franchise shop that I had been working in to get his opinion on what he thought of it as a business idea. And he was quite positive towards it. There wasn't masses of competition at the time in the area. So it was something that I rolled with. Started with one after school club through a contact I had made previously, and then schools speak to schools, and it kind of blossomed from there. We're still running now, 8 years later, and since we've started it, probably 2.5 years ago now, a coach that worked for us, he was friends with a professional footballer, Charlie Austin of Southampton, and we had been recommended as some guys to run his football school for him. So that's kind of a contract that we've taken on to deliver all of his sessions, which is great for us because it means more kids are coming in. It means we can work in different areas of the country. It means that we can affect more kids in a positive way. And what it really meant was that it pulled a focus on what we were trying to do and how we were trying to do it. Between 2010 and that 2015 time, I eventually decided, right, let's do another course. And I looked around to see what was out there. And the Youth Award was relatively new in around 2010, 2012 sort of time. And I went on my Youth Mod 1 and met Jack Walton. Now, Jack, you've had on before. Mm-hmm. And the way that he delivered that course just really engaged everybody in the room. And you could see that the way that they wanted us to deliver our sessions was the way that the course was being delivered to us, if that made sense.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of question and answer. We were engaged. We were involved in our own learning. And that just really energized me to want to do more and want to learn. So I got all of these techniques and read all the books, did all the pre-course work, everything else. Went and used that with my guys. And that really was almost a light bulb moment for me. From being a level 1, getting the knowledge of a level 2, but not getting a pass at the end of it, and delivering it in that way of the old style courses, going technique, skill, small-sided game as the platform and the structure of every session, into looking at constant practice, variable practice and random practice, looking at the benefits of each one, doing things like playing games at the start of a session rather than just doing it at the end. Loads of little things that I had never even considered before came out of that course. It wasn't all from the course content either. There was a lot of it from discussions with other coaches on the course. And there was a lot of time on that course to be able to converse with the other guys and pick their brains and then pick our brains. And so I think the environment created for the course was exactly what they wanted us to create for the children in the clubs, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I went on then probably about 9 months later, to be honest, did my Youth Award Module 2, which was all about developing practice and different types of practice, and was a bit of a recap on the Youth Mod 1, which was about environment, which was about like self-esteem, how to build that, confidence, different motivations, all those kinds of things. So there was a lot of social psych type stuff in those courses. Mm-hmm. During that time, from assisting Jack on the Youth Mod 1 was Mark Canham, who now works at the Premier League, but has also worked for the FA, has worked at Bristol City Academy. They were running a trainee scheme where you volunteered your time for a year, for a season. You could go in as much or as little as you want. And I went in twice a week, including a full day of day release from school. So the boys come in, they do a whole day. And I did that got my level 2 finally with my Youth Mod 1 and my Youth Mod 2 as well, which by that time I had developed quite a lot as a coach. So actually the level 2 stuff was great because it meant that I then had that accreditation from the governing body. But I'd been doing most of it anyway. And through the environment that I've been in, I was working with B licensed, A licensed coaches. So there was a lot of knowledge that I had picked up from that and from my different environments, which allowed me to do really well in that course and to help others within the course, which I think was really helpful for me as well. Having the conversations with the other guys and asking them why they're doing certain things and getting them to question me and being quite critical of ourselves. I think that really helped me with my development. I spent probably another 18 months just coaching locally in the community, coaching at the academy, working with their pre-academy boys, under 7s and under 8s. Then volunteered to help out in foundation phase. The club did a youth award module 3, which was all about developing the player, and different maturations and all the bits and pieces that come with developing technique and developing skills and developing physically and all those bits and pieces. And at the same time, I was doing my UEFA B. So that was quite tricky because the way that the FA wanted you to deliver on the youth award and the way that you had to deliver on the UEFA B was almost polar opposites. So one was all about questioning, guiding players to solutions to problems, and the other one was going in, creating a picture, telling them where to go. If they don't get it right, bringing them back, showing them again, telling them where to go until they get it right, which for me seems a little bit unrealistic because that's not how I would coach, whether that's with under 5s or under 18s or adults even. I still don't think that's probably my most effective way of delivering. It might be for others, but for me, it really, I didn't feel comfortable in just stepping in and going, no, you've done that wrong, do that. I wanted to probe them. And at one point in the UEFA B, the educator came to me and said, why are you asking questions? Just go and tell him. It's a driving test. Get the information, go and tell him, get the certificate, and then take the knowledge and go and apply that in your club however you need to apply it. Which was a bit of a kind of wake up for me, was that actually I was there to get a certificate, if you like. There was knowledge on the course, and that was good to have, but actually, like in my level 2 situation, having all the knowledge is great, but if you haven't got that accreditation from the governing body, it makes things slightly difficult. And obviously, to get a permanent job at the academy, I had to have the B licence. So there was a bit of pressure there to actually get the pass more than there was to learn the knowledge, if that makes sense.
Which kind of takes me on to one of my pet subjects, which is the how illogical is that? You know, that even on the course you're being told by the tutor, look, forget the methodology we're teaching here, just do what you need to do in order to get the pass and then go and coach in a totally different way. Well, which makes a complete mockery of coach education.
It was in my head, I'm sat there thinking, well, what's the point in that?
You may as well just give people videos of how to coach before they go and then let them rock up, copy what they've seen on the videos beforehand, and then go, right, see you later. There's no point attending the course. Pretty
much what it was. We watched the educators deliver sessions. Then we got a chance to deliver sessions. And if we didn't deliver it in the same way, and in the way that, it's not the educator's fault. It was the course content.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, it was, and obviously that's all changed now with the FA. They've amalgamated the 2 courses. And it's very much they come and see you in situ and they work with you and they assess you over the whole course, rather than you've done a course for 9 months and then you've got a 45-minute assessment, and if something goes wrong, you fail.
Yeah, some people might not be aware of that. So basically people think the youth awards have been taken away. They haven't, have they? They've been basically embedded in the UEFA B. Is that right?
Yeah, they basically, a youth mod 1 and a level 1 are now the same course. And the content, the technical, tactical stuff, from the level 1 or from the level 2 or whatever is in with delivering the same way that the youth award wanted people to deliver. So there's less time on it because obviously it's not 2 courses now.
Yeah.
So it's only 1 course. So I've not seen it myself, but my thought would be that it won't be as in depth. There won't be the time for all of those conversations with the other coaches and the activities that we did, and because obviously they've got so much content to fit into the course.
Yeah.
But from listening to other podcasts, I know Jack does one. I think that it's really positive the way that they've gone now with coach education, because people can get the accreditation by delivering how they need to deliver for the group of players in front of them.
Yeah, it's closer, I think, now to what they call now a spiral curriculum, which is it's sort of an ongoing learning ongoing learning that's kind of wrapped around the coach, and it's based on a combination of attendance at course plus practice plus assessment plus attendance at course plus practice plus assessment. So it's kind of a constant sort of learning journey, for want of a better phrase, which I think is a much better model for coaches rather than kind of like one gigantic, like one. Whilst you do get an awful lot of knowledge on the courses, I mean, you and I will both know, and having both done this, is that you end up, you learn a load of stuff, but you forget as much as you learn, if not more. 100%. So actually doing it over a period of time allows the knowledge to sort of embed more effectively and become part of practice.
Definitely.
Something you said back at the start actually just made me, it's just interesting listening to your story. It just strikes me, there's a couple of things there. Firstly, I think what I heard basically was that your coaching career, I suppose, is defined by a couple of things. One is a failure, which is when you didn't pass the level 2, which probably in hindsight, if you look back now, was probably a blessing, I guess, because it took you down a different journey of learning, which then when you came back and did do level 2 for being you were a far more rounded coach with a lot better knowledge to be able to bring to the table there than before.
Agreed.
So that's probably, I know probably at the time it didn't feel like that. And it also probably, I suppose, fired you up a bit, didn't it? To say, I'll show them.
Definitely. It was a case of, I was devastated when I was taken into the room and told, you failed. And the reason for failing was, shall we say, not not the happiest moment in the world. Basically, the educator had, at the time it was 8v8. You had to affect everybody on the team. My topic was, and I remember it to this day, improving roles and understanding of forward players, which for a level 2, in my head, is more B licensed stuff.
Yeah.
So it's very much past. So when I went to the educator and I said, well, this topic, is that creating space? Is that overlapping runs? Is that underlapping runs? Is that crossover runs? Is that through balls? Is that forward passing? Is that finishing? He said it's all of it. And I went, right, okay. So I'm doing this session and it's actually going quite well. And I'm getting some bits out of it. And at the time as well, 2 guys took the course. 2 completely different people came in to assess you that you had never met before.
Yeah.
So they come in to assess your session and see if it was at the level that it needed to be at. And he told the goalkeeper of the team I was coaching, so I'm coaching their forwards and midfielders, if you like. He told the goalkeeper to stand in his goal behind the line and see if I recognised. And obviously I'm in doing some detail with some strikers, so didn't recognise that the goalkeeper was dropped into the goal. And that was the reason I was given for failing.
Oh, dear.
So I was absolutely devastated. I couldn't believe what had happened. And to me, I'm thinking, God, how did I miss that? How did I miss that? And then I spoke to the goalie and he said, no, I was told to stand in the goal. So that was fun. So that really, for me, like, I went away from that thinking, God, I hate this. I don't want to be involved with this.
And then the other thing, I suppose. So at the time that it was obviously a negative experience, but it probably it reminded me a little bit of when I first went to do my A levels. I'd basically breezed through my GCSEs and then went to do my A levels and sort of got into the social scene, shall we say, and just thought I could kind of cruise through my A levels as well, and didn't get the grades I needed, so I had to retake and do another year. And that was one of the most valuable learning, because at the time it was horrible because everybody else was going off to university and I didn't get to go. But in the flip side, basically my mantra for that entire year was fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And it drove me to, and I basically developed an awful lot of kind of a work ethic and a commitment, which then absolutely stood me in brilliant stead for the rest of my career doing everything else. So I actually think sometimes these sort of failure moments are often really defining and really important. The other thing I heard was there was another key moment, wasn't there, which is probably regretful and you didn't necessarily want to happen, which was essentially, the company going bust and you basically being out of a job, forcing you into a route and committing yourself to a career as a coach, which again might not have happened had that not taken place.
I've had that conversation with so many people.
Yeah.
Had he not walked in the shop on a Tuesday afternoon it was, and said, "You got to go home," I'd have never written the A4 sheet of paper. It would have stayed as an idea in my head. It would never have come out. I would have stayed in that job. I'd still be doing that job today and coaching locally, just a grassroots team with probably a level 2 and no more, if even a level 2. So yeah, definitely that for me is the moment where I was at a crossroads. So I could either just go and find another job or I could say, right, this is an opportunity for me to go and do what I want to do.
Yeah. So, interesting stuff. So you're on this journey now with inclusion. So basically, tell me about the kind of philosophy and underpinning approach and values, that inclusion is all about. If I was to send one of my kids along to one of your sessions, what should I expect?
Okay, so it's changed obviously over 8 years from when we started to where we are now. Right now, if you sent a child to us, you would see lots of games. With different conditions that will encourage them to practice different techniques in a game situation. So to the uneducated eye, that might look like they're just playing. They're just playing games. All they do, they go there, they just play games. I've heard that. But actually one of the games called pass and shoot, really simple. If you pass it 3 times and score, you get 4 goals. If you pass it 10 times and score, you get 11 goals. If you pass it 21 times and miss, you don't get any goals. So what that does is it encourages them to try lots of different types of passes. So it's not just the same pass over and over. Each player will probably do 30, 40, 50 different passes in a game. There's a lot of decision making because it's when do I go forward? How do we go forward? What do we need to do to go forward? When do we take our shot? What type of shot selection's there? And if we give the ball away, we have to start back at 0. So it's about retaining possession as well. What we do as well is we get the kids to set a target of goals of what they want to get to. Usually they'll go with 15, 16. But if they go over their target, they lose the game. So if they get to, let's say they've chosen 15 and they get to 14, they've then got to score a solo goal. So what they're trying to do completely changes to try and win the game.
Yeah. And
that's just one example of the games. But every game has got some kind of condition on it. I hate the word I don't know if I'd use the word condition. But some kind of rule that allows them to practice different things within a game.
Yeah.
And that game might be 2v2. It might be 3v3. It might be 8v8. It depends on the group in front of us and what they want to do, really. We try to give them the choice. Would you like to do this in a 3v3? Or would you like, how many players do you want on your team? That kind of thing. So that's just an example of one of the things. But if you're stepped back and watching it and you don't coach and you probably watch Match of the Day on a Saturday night, you may well see it as just, they're just playing games.
And this is a theme that you have encountered ever since you embarked on this journey, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much since I did my Youth Mod 1, there's a couple of things. Like, I call it kind of the perception of non-coaching. So what we're doing, for me, has huge value and allows the kids, every time they get the ball, it's decision-making whilst practicing techniques. But, I mean, just a little thing on this perception. I was working at a local club and I don't talk while the game's going on. I talk before it, I talk in the break, we have a little chat after it, and then the kids go home. We give challenges to the team in possession or out of possession. that simple. Just one thing for in possession, one thing for out of possession. And then during the game, I would have a notepad and I would have all the names on a piece of paper. And if I saw something going well, I'd just make a little note of it. So to somebody watching, I might not look as though I'm watching the game. So there's an away game and a couple of guys from the local club turn up to watch. And I got questioned on why I wasn't watching the game because a parent had said to them, he doesn't watch the game. So for me, when the kid's coming off, I'm going, oh, look at all the things you've done well. Look at that. That's amazing. Did you realise you had done that well? Oh, I hadn't. Or yeah, I had actually. You know, that kind of response. And then they go back onto the pitch, absolutely buzzing, because I've noticed that they've done something well. But the perception was that I wasn't watching the game. And I was questioned by other coaches from within the club on why don't you watch the games? Which in my head was crazy. Yeah, and I mean that progressed, and we went on to the subs, making notes, picking a player in their position, and just writing a little note down about things that player did well, or maybe things that player could improve on. And then they fed that back to the player when they came off the pitch at half time. Yeah, and it was just seen as like I wasn't watching the game because I wasn't stood there being your traditional, telling them what to do, directing them. You know, I was saying, oh, great effort. Well done for trying that. And then making a little note. Mad. That was the first, I think that was probably the first thing I encountered of this perception that I wasn't like watching a game of football. There's been other ones since. We've done like a one-day camp, which is just these games that we've got in our program. And the parents come to me at the end and said, well, they've just played games all day. Okay, well, I'm not so sure they have. Okay, why do you think that? And then I've stood for half an hour, maybe, talking around what we do, why we do it, how we do it. So it just, to me, it just appears that there's this perception that if you're not stood doing what has been traditionally seen as what a coach should do, then you're not coaching. And if you're at a local club and it's voluntary, people it's a different kind of thought process. With us, because people are paying us for their kids to come and be coached, there's a real kind of, they're like, well, we're paying you and you're not coaching them. And I'm like, well, I am. I am actually. But so yeah.
What approaches have you taken to kind of overcome this perception of non-coaching?
We've shared on social media. We've wrote blogs. Well, I say we, me. I always say we because obviously there's other guys that coach with me, and you know I like to see us all as one and working together. But yeah, no. So I've wrote blogs on it. I've shared them through all of our social media streams. I've had conversations with parents. I've tried to run little workshops totally free. Just turn up and we'll do a session, and then we'll show you like what we're doing. You guys get involved. You deliver something. Ask us loads of questions. Just out on the grass. Don't tend to get a very positive response in terms of numbers of coaches turning up, which is disappointing. But yeah, so we've tried lots of different ways of getting our message out there. Is that actually we believe that your child will learn more through a kind of game environment rather than you stand at that cone, you stand at that cone, and we'll practice 3 different techniques of passing. So
now you'll be able to point coaches and parents to this episode of the Talent Equation podcast as a way
of hopefully
explaining. So just on that, just to sort of in the interests of living within our philosophy, we'll play a little game, which is I'm going to play devil's avocado or devil's advocate, and kind of sort of ask the questions, because these are the sorts of questions obviously that I know various members of academic community, parents, etc., etc. These are the sort of questions that people who don't quite get this approach. And then obviously you can answer those questions, and then that will hopefully bring to life what the philosophy is. Now, one is so if we're there as coaches, if you're there as their coach, right, and these kids are going to, I'm sending these kids there to develop, I'm paying my money to you in order to develop my young individual, either because I've got aspirations for them to become, as good as they can possibly be, or whatever it might be, or just because I'd like them to, develop all the benefits of, self-efficacy and all the different things about becoming more proficient at this game. And they go there and essentially they play games, and yes, you put these conditions on these games, but how do you know, or how can you evidence that learning is actually taking place?
God, what a question. How can I evidence it? Do you mean historically from what we've done, or do you mean right there in that moment?
Probably both. I mean, the reason I asked the question is because I think it's actually one of the challenges and one of the things that's incumbent upon us, those of us who kind of are aligned to what you might call ecological game-based approach, is I think we need to be able to evidence that the methodology is an appropriate methodology for what we're doing. So one of the challenges I get all the time from the academic community is prove it. Go on. It's all very well saying that this is an approach that's really going to work, but prove it. Show me that these individuals are developing over and above using another method.
Okay. There's probably two strands, I would say, that I've seen as almost evidence of the fact that it works in the way that I believe is the best way for it to work. So the first one is participation. So kids that come back. Even I had a conversation with a parent who brought his son for 2 days in February, but decided not to bring him back for the third day due to lack of content. I'll go into that later. But in the message from the parent, he openly admits that his child had enjoyed the 2 days. So for me, and what we look at and what we want from it, and that's for kids to have a great time and want to come back and engage with the game. And yes, it's great if they go on and be in an academy or end up playing pro or play a good level locally. That's brilliant. But for me, it's about the kids participating and coming back and continuing to engage with the game. So if our participation numbers stay at a good level and rise, and we get lots of repeat customers, not customers, but like the children keep coming back.
Yeah, can use some customers. That's fine. I mean, I actually think we need to treat participants like a bit more like customers, to be honest, because in other fields, if you don't serve your customers well, they don't come back. I think we have to think in the same way. So it's not a bad thing to talk about them as customers.
Okay, so yeah, customers. If I get my customers coming back to me, then that for me shows actually the reason that we do things is so that kids enjoy football and participate, and they are participating and they are coming back, so they must be enjoying it.
Yeah.
Because if they weren't enjoying it, they wouldn't be there. The other side is if we're looking at development and we want to see kids go on and get into academies and play, we've had seven players now that have worked with us since 2015, actually. So since I started putting this program together, since 2015, we've had 7 players that have gone and joined Category 1, Category 2, and Category 3 academies within the area. So that might not be a massive number, like other companies will say, we've had 30 kids go into academies. Woo. That's for them. That's what they want to do. That's how they see their model. For me, it's about participation. But if through that participation and through our program, we can develop some players that go on and play the game at a very high level, that's just another indicator that actually the way that we do it works. If that makes sense?
Yeah. So interestingly, I think something you've just said there kind of stresses, I think, it's interesting element that I want to just draw out, which is philosophically, your alignment is towards participation, and for young people to, develop a genuine passion and then a love for the game.
Yeah.
And if in doing that they also develop their capabilities and that allows them to progress to the next level, then that's obviously welcome, but it isn't your main focus.
No.
So interestingly enough, I think if some parents, and parents are customers as well, because ultimately they're buying the product as well, aren't they? So if some parents wanted their child to go somewhere that had more of a talent development ethos, then
more of a traditional talent development.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yes, well rephrased. More of a traditional talent development ethos. Then in some respects, I suppose it's probably natural that some of them might decide they want to take their young person somewhere else.
Yeah, and there'll always be. We'll always find that people will go this place, that place. You might find they do a combination of all.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of people that will come to me during a half term, and then for weekly sessions they'll be at the local development centre, in inverted commas, and they'll be doing their ball mastery and all the bits and pieces. And then when they come to us, they'll be in 1v1s, 2v2s, 3v3s, 8v8s, playing these games with these conditions. What we also do within the games is a lot of individual intervention. So we never stop the game, or we try very little to stop the game. But if I feel that a question or a comment might probe some thought from a player, I'll just jump in the middle of the game, take a knee next to the player, ask them a question and see what response we get. I think it's also really important within that you don't, if the kid comes up with something different to what you're thinking, that might not be wrong. Actually, for that kid, that might work. So if they come up with something, brilliant. They're trying to be creative. So go on then, have a go. See if it works. And then revisit it with them. I think it's really important that you revisit it, because it's all right asking the question, probing the thought, but if you don't revisit it, then I feel that sometimes it can just get lost in the game and everything else. So yeah, that's just something else that if you were at our session, you'd see us do. It's just jump in and a couple of little individual interventions there. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's really important that they have a combination of your grassroots football, of different environments and different ways of delivering. Because I don't think that it's a one-size-fits-all thing. I don't think we can say, well, our way is the best way, and that's it, and there's no other way, and you can't do it. You've got to do it our way. That's not right, because actually for each kid it'll be different.
So, but philosophically as well, I mean, and this is why I always think philosophies are important, and I would say this because I'm particularly interested in this particular field, but I think interestingly enough though, I mean, what I said earlier on about your philosophy being sort of participation driven, that does not have to be, it's one of the things I keep trying to express on people, that does not have to be at the expense of more of a player development approach. So when you had that letter from the parent saying he has enjoyed it, I'm assuming it was a he, has enjoyed the sessions, but I think he needs something else. What they're basically saying is that they want to buy into something that's going to be less enjoyable, but the less enjoyment is something they're just prepared to bear, because they feel that their child needs to have something that's less enjoyable because it's going to give them more sort of player development, skill development outcomes. And I imagine, like you, I think that is a fundamental mistake that most people have.
I totally agree. For me, I've always found, and I'm sure everybody else has found it, the session when you're at school and you're in a classroom, the subjects that you enjoy the most are probably the ones that you're best at. And you probably get better at them because you enjoy them. So you put more time into them and you're more engaged with it. So therefore you learn more about it and then you're better at it. That's just how I see like that kind of thought process is, if you're not enjoying something, how are you going to engage with it?
Yeah.
You know?
I was on. I stumbled across a guy on Twitter who'd written an article. A guy called Greg Ashman, who'd written an article about inquiry learning, which is this kind of more exploratory, problem-based learning approach. And he was very critical of it, and in this particular article, and said it, inquiry-based learning versus explicit instruction, and how explicit instruction is a better model, and he's got evidence and all these sorts of different things. And the article itself is there's lots of challenges, and I've invited Greg to come on the podcast at some stage to discuss it, because there's lots of questions I have about it, and I'd love to, almost like challenge my own beliefs and my own thinking. However, one of the things that he actually says, or if you go on his blog, I think he quotes somebody, but his blog's title is along the lines of it's not about filling up the pail, it's about lighting a fire underneath it. So I think this is the problem people have is that they assume that good coaching is based around an idea of basically filling up the bucket. So you fill up the bucket with stuff, technical stuff, tactical stuff, knowledge and abilities, and the assumption is that once you've filled it up enough, that individual will become brilliant. Enough stuff goes in the bucket and it'll be brilliant. The problem that they don't understand is that if you use but what you're talking about is the other way around. You're talking about lighting the fire. So if you get somebody driven by the idea of how do I play this game, or I really love this and there's things I need to be able to do and I want to learn how to do them, then if you light that fire in them, they'll start to be able to develop their own solutions. They'll start to come up with different ideas, all those sorts of things. So you're working that way, aren't you?
Yeah. So the perfect example of that is this idea of ball mastery. So, like, if I did a session that had ball mastery, I've done it before. We actually probably back in 2014 ran what we called a development center for probably 2 months, and then I just couldn't do it anymore, just because it was killing me. We were delivering how people expected to see a development center delivered, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So we were doing ball mastery. We were doing a little session and then playing a little game at the end. And the ball mastery stuff, if I show a child 3 skills and then they don't do them how I say to do them, and I go in and correct them and make them do it how I do it, they'll only ever be as good as me. Well, if the kids that I'm coaching are only ever as good as me, they're in trouble. Because as much as I love the game, I was never the best player. I wouldn't profess to be anything other than a recreational football player that enjoyed playing the game. So my thought would be, in that kind of scenario, is, right, you've got 2 players, 1 ball. You've got to keep the ball for a minute. If you lose it, the other guy's keeping the ball, or girl's keeping the ball. And then whoever's got the ball at the end of the minute gets the point. And then you go for another minute. And then that way they're mastering the football, but it's under pressure. There's other pairs within the same area, so there's lots of variability going on. But they've only got to worry about the one player tackling them. I think matching's really important when we do that. So we don't want to put, well, we do sometimes want to put a smaller player with a bigger player, because then there's a different challenge. But I think you want everybody to try and gain some success. So yeah, for me, like, this idea of I'll show you, I'll give you this knowledge, then you do it how I did it, and that'll make you a good player. It's just flawed, because they'll only ever be as good as me. And we want them to be better than me. I want every player that I work with to end up loving the game as much as I do, but being better than me at football.
Yeah, I think, and that's the thing for me. That's one of my fears, some of my constant fears, is that I will only allow the individuals in front of me to become as good as I know how to make them. And I know the limitations of my kind of understanding and knowledge. But not just that. I don't want them to be able to play the game that I played 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I want them to learn to play the game that they're going to play in 10 years' time. And I don't know what that looks like now, because the game that I started playing looks nothing like the game I'm playing now. The approaches, the tactics, the techniques, the pace, the speed, the dynamics, everything else, that's all changed. So I don't want them to learn to play the game that I learned to play, because blimey, I mean, we used to have offside in hockey back then in the day, so the defensive techniques were totally different. Now they've moved offside away, and all of a sudden the game's opened up and the space has opened up, and now you can pass the ball to yourself and all this sort of stuff, and it's just a completely different game. Almost, well, it's not completely different, but the way the game is played is very, very different. And I've had to adjust to that. And whereas young people, I want them to be able to sort of, almost like future-proof their expertise. So I've got another question, if you allow me to carry on playing our little game of devil's advocate. Okay, so the kids come back, right? And you've got good retention numbers, and their participation numbers are high, so obviously they enjoy it, right? Is it just junk food?
What do you mean?
Well, so basically, I give my kids two choices: something that, I think is going to be more nourishing, or something like, go out and have some junk food, pizza or burger. They're going for that every single time. So it's these sessions that are game-based, that they enjoy and love. Is it just junk food? Actually, it's got no nutritional value, and they're actually not learning anything, developing anything from it. So, of course, they might be coming back regularly because they're going back for stuff that they like. But actually, what if they need something else?
Yeah, of course. Wow. Is it junk food? See, this is so that message from that parent, it actually said no content. It said they were disappointed with the lack of content, and that it wasn't what they expected from a football school. And that really, I had spent 8 years developing this program, and then based on 10 hours, I was told there's no content. It's rubbish. So, is it junk food? Wow. No, I wouldn't say it was. I think there's so much value in the kids practicing so many different techniques within the game and getting this repetition without repetition idea that you've spoken about before. They're making hundreds of passes, but every pass is different. Every picture is different. Every way they receive it's different because the ball's coming at them in a different way. I think it's so much more kind of colourful, for want of a better word. And there's so much more stuff, so much more meat on the bones by doing it within a game than there would be if we just did a passing backwards and forwards type exercise.
Yeah, but I brought my child along to this. I brought my child along to this particular session. They played loads of games and had a great time.
Yeah.
But at the start of the session, they couldn't pass the ball with their left foot, and at the end of the session, they couldn't pass the ball with their left foot. What the hell's going on?
Okay. What is going on? So, that's where we'd look at individual challenges.
Okay.
Where I'd ask the children, what do you think you're strong at? Where do you think you need to get better? How can this game do that? So before we start the game, we talk about what the game means, what the game's asking you to do, and we provoke some thought around how they're going to get to their objective. They have a team talk before the game, so they figure out their positions, they figure out how they want to play, their formation, all that kind of bits and pieces. Yeah, and so I think that from the outside looking in, that might be how it's seen. But for me, again, there's just so much in there. And he may have, in a game, in a situation, in that moment, might have used his left foot. But then when you say to him, right, stand there and pass it with your left foot, he might not be able to do it. But he might be able to do it based on the picture, based on the situation he's in. And if you don't put them in that situation, how do you know whether they can do it or not?
Yeah.
We've got a lad who struggles at this ball mastery stuff because he just doesn't find it engaging. But when he plays in a game, he doesn't need to do a step over to beat a player. He drops his shoulder and just touches it out with his other foot, and he beats the player. He uses his speed to push the ball past if there's space behind. His understanding of how to beat a player based on the situation is really, really good. Mm. But his ball mastery and his techniques or his passing techniques aren't necessarily the best. But he is so effective within a game. Does it matter?
So this is where I think a lot of people, I don't want to say everybody, or I don't want to say, but I think a lot of people, and actually a lot of us in the sports community and in the talent community, we've got it wrong. So the assumption is that that it works this way. You develop the technical capability in order to apply the technique in a tactical context, in that order. It's a linear model. And the bit that's missing, the bit that people don't get, is that I think we've got that all wrong. You actually need to develop the tactical appreciation before you then develop the technical capability to take advantage of whatever the tactical scenario is. That's a much more powerful learning model around the idea of, right, something in this game I can't do and I need to find a way of solving that problem, so I'm going to now solve that problem based on what I've experienced. That's very powerful. And you watch kids who play video games, that's what happens. They can't beat the big boss. Right, we're going to find a way to beat the big boss. Let's try this, let's try that, let's try the other, let's try this, let's try that, let's try the other. Oh, I've got it now. And then that's it. They start talking to each other and say, this is like this, like this. That's the model. That they're absorbed by that. That's how they learn. And you watch how absorbed and absolutely engrossed in a video game that they are, because they're actually going through a process of learning. Now, we do it the other way around in school, and we do it the other way around in sport. We go, here's the solution that you're going to need at some point, right? We don't know when you're going to need it, but you're definitely going to need this solution. So you're going to learn this solution and then come into the game, and then let's see at the appropriate moment. What more often than not happens is they try the solution at the wrong time. And they don't quite work out the connection between the wrong time and no, I've just learned this solution. It should kind of work all the time. And then they have to go through a really difficult process of almost kind of unlearning the process that they've learned to relearn it in the context. It's actually an enormous waste of time.
Yeah. Well, that's how I see it.
Yeah.
I see it as, let's see what they can do in the game. If they then can't do something, or there's something that they need to train on. So as an example, I'm not confident in their left foot, to use your example. Mm-hmm. So therefore they try to cut back inside to play with their right foot, and they're losing the ball and it's not working for them. Mm-hmm. Then it might be a case that we, instead of being in an 8v8 or a 6v6 or whatever, we bring it back to a 2v2. Mm-hmm. Or we bring it and we actually make an overload so that there's less pressure on the ball. Yeah. So you go 6v3. Yeah. And then encourage them and challenge them to try and use their weaker foot as much as possible. Don't tell them they have to do it, but give them that challenge of, can you try to do this? Yeah. And then they might do it once, they might do it twice. And the more they do it, the more confident they'll get at it. Then you can add another player back in. Yeah. So there's a little bit more pressure. And then they're still learning it with some context, rather than just being pulled out, right, we need to work on your left foot. So I'll pass it to you, receive it with one foot, pass it back with the other one.
Yeah.
I can see that you need work on your first touch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you in a box. I'm going to kick the ball from 10 yards away, and you've got to control it in the box.
Yeah.
It might not be the situation within the game.
Absolutely.
And
you wouldn't, and also if there's no opponent there, then there's no need to adapt. So you can work on something that is, you can work on a particular movement with no opponent, and there's no one there to stop you, and therefore firstly it'll be unrealistic. And I've heard loads of coaches say, imagine it's like a game. Well, why imagine? Just make it like one. Whenever I hear someone say that, I just think, what are you doing? Make it like a game. Why do they need to imagine it? Oh, because if there's other people there, then it'll get in the way and they won't be able to perform the action. Well, that's the point.
It is the point. The way I explain it to some people sometimes, because people do question me, people do ask why we do what we do. I say, when you went on your first driving lesson, you were shown the controls of the car. You moved the car backwards and forwards a bit. Were you on a road that was closed to everybody else? You then drove around the town and they had closed the town down. There was no other cars anywhere. All of the lights would turn to green, so you could just keep going. You knew every distance that was coming and every speed that you were going was going to be. Or did you get shown the controls of the car, move the car backwards and forwards, and then go on the road where there's other cars, there's roundabouts, there's red lights, there's different distances, different speeds, and you've got to adapt to everything. And that's how you learn to drive. You don't learn to drive by just knowing how to control the car and then, here you go, here's a certificate, here's a license, go on the road. You should be able to do it with loads of other cars because you've shown me that you can do it with no other cars.
Yeah.
You know, actually, you learn in the context of what's going on, and then you're driving, every time you're driving, is adapting to what's going on around you.
There is a challenge with the driving test analogy, though, which is that what some people would say, and I've heard them say this, is, yes, but I got told how to do it before I did it. I didn't just start driving and then kind of work out how to use the clutch and everything else as I was doing it. And I'm sort of saying, yeah, but that's very different from a sports context, because in a car, if you don't do the things that need to be done, it doesn't go. And also, if you do it wrong, you can kill people, including yourself. So it's life and death. So fair enough. You might be a little bit. Somebody else challenged me back and said, surgeons, you wouldn't expect surgeons just to have a crack. Yeah, I know, because they're going to kill someone if they do. So it's a slightly different scenario. Whereas in our context, they're not. No one's going to die if they do it wrong, apart from if it was something particularly foolish. But likewise, almost the point that's the actual point, is that we actually actively want them to find different ways of doing things, because they're those genuine moments. I honestly, my biggest fear is telling somebody to do something and therefore closing away a load of opportunities for them.
Completely.
Just something else I was thinking about as well is, did you see that image that was shared by, I think it was the England hockey website, where they had the told and shown, shown and experienced.
Yeah, I retweeted it the other day, actually.
Yeah, and the retention levels. So the interesting thing about this, and this is what people don't understand, is that when you're told and shown something, generally speaking, there is an element of an immediate response.
Yeah.
But it's not retained over a period of time. So the retention bit is the important thing. The problem is that you don't see the retention. It's not there in front of you. And this is the bit I think we have to get across, is that we're in a long-term business here. We're not in the short-term business. We're not expecting necessarily to see improvements in, say, technique or tactical appreciation immediately within the session to session. We're not working on a sessional basis. We're on a long-term basis. Yeah. And we're working towards retention. And I think a number of us said, I'd want to see some others in that picture, not just told, shown, and experienced. I'd have, questioned and experienced, and maybe just experienced.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we all said those sorts of things. I'd be interested to see what the retention rates on that were. But the interesting thing for me is that it's about depth. It's about depth of understanding and depth of appreciation. And that might take longer. But if we understand that it's going to take longer, but we're going to get more. So it's about quality, not just about the initial output. I think that's an important message to get across to some parents. So I would have that picture everywhere I was going if I was in your shoes. The other thing I was going to say as well is that this is where I also think that the non-linear pedagogical approach or non-linear pedagogy is helpful to us. Because if we say, look, we buy into the idea of a non-linear approach. So it's not just A equals B equals C. And you'll see that in the session, and then logically in your mind, you go, I see what he's doing. He's gone X, Y, and Z, therefore, or A, B, C, boom, I get it. That all works for me. This is the problem is with nonlinear pedagogy. It's kind of counterintuitive. So what people are seeing is not what they expect, and therefore they can't compute that something's happening. Well, we say, well, we're working in a non-linear way. Humans don't learn in a linear way. It's a windy path. So we put in front of them lots of obstacles that they've got to overcome on the windy path, and the act of them getting round the obstacle or over the obstacle or exploring through the obstacle is the learning, and that's what takes place. And you use the game as the obstacle, basically, don't you?
Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, for me, I just don't see it as I'll give you a skill and then you'll be able to do it in the game. Because you might never need to do it in the game either.
No.
That particular skill. So, I don't know. There's lots of different thought processes, as you know, and lots of different people do things different ways and have ranging success, depending on what they see success as. For me, I mean, we'll do a 3-day camp, so they've got 15 hours with us. I'd hope by the end of the 15 hours, firstly, they've had a great time. And secondly, either their understanding of the game has improved, but also their technique has improved just through having that exposure to lots of different pictures, lots of different ways of having to do things, and they'd be more adaptable within a game than when they came to us at the start.
Yeah.
And then obviously if they come back the next time, they get another 15 hours. And, hopefully then over the course of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you would see a big rise. And I mean, we've been running 8 years, and there's players that, God, at the start, we were like, my God, you can't kick a ball. Now they're playing a really good level. Now, that's not just because of what we do, obviously. That's because of the combination of grassroots football, of development centre, development centres, and what we do. And I don't see many other companies delivering in the way that we deliver, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very much, right, what do we need to do so that parents see this as the way of doing it? And that means we'll get more people in. And then, that's seen as, oh, look at this. We've come to this development centre. There's loads of kids here and we're doing this. But for me, it's that retention. So do they keep coming back? And why do they keep coming back? Do they keep coming back because they enjoy themselves? Do they keep coming back because of the golden carrot on the stick at the end? I mean, for me, there's not this linear way of learning it. I think you have to chuck them in a game. You have to see what they can do. As I said earlier, if we don't put them in a game to play, how do we know what they can do? If we start the session with, right, we're going to do ball mastery, half of the kids might not need to learn to do a step over. They might never use it in a game, or they might be really good at it already. But if we don't know that by putting them in a game and seeing what they can do, then we're wasting not only our time, but the kids' time, the parents' time, everyone's time.
Stepovers are a load of old junk anyway.
I don't see anyone do it. Well, how often does Messi do one?
Honestly, yeah. But also, I see people, even at the pro level, you see people do multiple stepovers, and you just see the defender watching the ball. And it doesn't make any difference. What makes a difference is the eventual shift that they create and the change of balance of the opponent. They'd be much better off learning to unbalance the opponent in different ways with different, it's just, anyway, that's by the by. Some people absolutely love stepovers, so it's one of those things. The one thing I was going to say is I actually think techniques, basically, I actually think techniques are junk food. Oh, blimey, I'm going somewhere else. So I think coaches are addicted to techniques. Why? Because they like to see an individual learn a technique and get the technique and move away from it. And the kids like it too. And why is that? Well, because they feel like they're getting something. Oh, I've got a technique. It's like a toy. Yeah. I'm writing a blog post about this. I don't want to get in the way of the blog post, but I may as well just share it here. So basically, it's like a toy. It's a toy robot, right? Or it's a toy, whatever it is. And that toy robot, it does certain things, right? But you can only use it for that thing. And once you've learned how to use your toy robot, you get bored of your toy robot because your toy robot only does certain things that the toy robot programmed to do. I think what we're talking about is the cardboard box. So the cardboard box can be anything, can't it? You can turn a cardboard box into a car, a rocket. You can turn it into a den. You can turn it into anything. You explore inside a cardboard box and turn the cardboard box into what you want it to do. You can make the cardboard box, you can flatten it down, make it into all sorts of different things. And kids will explore, you've seen it before, so it's the ongoing joke, isn't it, that kids at Christmas time will play with the box and not with the toy.
I've got
That's why.
Old child. Oh, yeah.
But it's the equivalent. So what we're saying is, look, we're going to come and play in a cardboard box. You can do anything you want with a cardboard box. Play with it if you want to. Do as many things as you want to with a cardboard box. What we don't want you to do, though, is we don't want to give you just a robot, because you'll get bored of the robot, and then we'll have to give you another robot that's glossier and shinier. And I think it's the same with techniques. We give somebody that we as coaches, we give them the shiny robot, and we see the smile on the child's face, and we go, yes, we've done a brilliant job as a coach. And then we feel good. We get the buzz. The kid goes, oh, I've got a shiny robot. But what they don't realize is that they're going to be bored of the shiny robot, and the shiny robot probably won't be actually that valuable to them. And I do think that's one of our biggest challenges working in this way, is it doesn't intuitively feel like there's something coming from here. You don't get in the shiny robot, so you don't get the buzz and the hit and the dopamine that you get from that. And the other bit from us is it probably sometimes feels a little bit like, so I don't think we are junk food. I think techniques are junk food. I think what we are is really nutritional. But weirdly, because it's really good and nutritional, it might not necessarily immediately give that sense of pleasure immediately. You know what I mean? It's not like a hit, but it's very nourishing. And so actually, I think that's one of the reasons I think it's the most valuable approach, in my opinion. Why I'm so committed to it is because I think we're getting the actual best of both worlds. We're getting the nourishment and actually we're enjoying it's good, wholesome, really nice food. You know what I mean? I can't use a food analogy anymore, but you know what I mean.
You're right. It's like going on with food. If you eat one apple, then you don't feel any different. If you eat one chocolate bar, you feel great because you've had a chocolate bar.
Yeah.
But over time, you get bored of the chocolate, and the apple, you keep eating apples or fruits or whatever, makes you feel better. You're healthier. If you do it, if you look at the food way, that's.
Or you get addicted to the chocolate, even though you know it's not really doing you any good, and you just keep cramming it in your pie hole.
Yeah.
You can't stop yourself anymore. I'm not talking from personal experience at all. I mean, I think it's one of those things where I actually do think, and I think we're going to be like this for quite some time, because of this counterintuitive nature of the approaches. I think we're just going to have to sell it. We're going to have to just get used to, and almost just relentlessly get used to the idea of selling this approach, selling the why of the approach. I mean, I've worked with quite a few coaches, and I've seen them. They kind of, it's almost like it's like their kind of introduction that they just literally play out. It's almost like, right, when you come to this, I want you to understand something. We believe in this approach, and we believe in, why do we believe it? Because we believe in human learning, and we believe in this, that, and the other, and we believe in nonlinear pedagogy and all these different things. And that's why what you see here won't look like what you expect it to see, but it's what it is. This is why, and everything else. I think we're going to just have to get used to doing that, if I'm honest, because for quite some time, I don't think it's going to be the norm. And as a result, I think we're going to have to just get used to that. And I suppose you're also just going to have to get used to the fact that some people are just not. Somebody would not be able to buy it. I had a decent length conversation recently at a conference with an ex-international sportsman, and we were debating this because I could see that he wanted to get on board, but something inside him, deep inside his core, was like, you still need to do a drill. You still need a technique. If you can't do the technique, you can't do the thing. And I was like, yeah, so there are some people who really want to get on board here, but they just can't quite get there. And that's, I think, where a lot of the people who go, oh, it's a bit of both, bit of balance, bit of tell, bit of question, bit of tell. They're the people who ask for balance. I think sometimes, that's partially why. It's like, oh, I really want to go there, but I just can't quite get myself there yet. And I think that's quite an interesting challenge that we're going to face.
Agreed. I've thought that the tack to take for a long time has been, we'll do a bit of this and we'll do a bit of that. I am so now in the corner of delivering the way we deliver, and I just totally believe that is the best all-round experience for the children that come to us. That, yeah, I'm almost like, I can't remember the last time I did a drill. You know, yeah, I really can't. Even to the point where like warm-up games will be fox and hounds, where they got a tail and they run and someone's trying to catch them.
Yeah.
So you'll look at different movement patterns and bits and pieces.
The only bit I have changed slightly, or the bit where I have moved away, is I'm just being much more exploratory around the kind of 1-to-1v1, providing a bit more space for 1v1 exploratory and discovery opportunities around exploring different solutions. Because the one thing that I do think about the game-based approach is it does sometimes not leave for enough repetitions or enough goes at a particular move in order for the individual to be, but it's always contextualized. So it is always a game, almost always a game of some kind. The only change, for example, might be, let's say we were going to do, in a hockey context, we were going to do hitting, right? And we might be working on power. Now, there are games we play a lot of, which is about power hitting, where there's an opponent trying to stop you getting the ball through the gate, and you're playing 1v1, and it's, we call it crossfire. Remember the old crossfire game where you used to fire ball bearings at a thing in the middle? It's the same sort of idea, basically. But I have played a game which is unopposed, where basically they smack the ball as hard as they can, and the person whose ball gets to the end fence first wins. And that's because the focus is power. So you don't need an opponent there, because we're only working on power, right? And so that's fine, but I'm still keeping variability because they're still competing against each other, so it's still a game. Or it might be we play a game where we whack a ball against the fence and see how far we can make it rebound, and see who gets the furthest, and then you set a record, and then we'll see who's got the longest one. Again, we're not talking about direction, we're not talking about passing, we're just talking about pure and simple power. In which case, again, the context of that doesn't necessarily require us to have an opponent to do that. So that's when you might see something done in isolation, but it's only because it doesn't require a context to develop. But in every other environment, the majority, 85% of the time, if not 90% of the time, you're going to see somebody trying to stop you doing something when you're learning to do something.
Yeah, and that's not a match, but it's still a game.
Game, yeah, absolutely.
Because they're competing against others. Mm-hmm. There's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to get better. you know. So yeah, it's still this is what I'm saying. Like, it might not look like a football match. Yeah. It might not be a match, but it'll be a game where they're competing with other people, where there's someone trying to stop them doing something, where there's variability. There might be safe zones that people can go in where they can't get tackled, but there's still a game. There's still someone trying to get the ball, someone trying to do better than you, whilst you're trying to do better than you as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, look, this has been a brilliant conversation, Steve, and a long overdue one. I really, I sort of feel as if it's been kind of part challenge, part therapy, part kind of violent agreement. But one thing I would say to you is, once again, thanks for the patience of putting up with my scheduling, but also I'd say, just keep fighting the good fight. I feel like certainly if the response I'm getting to the podcast is anything to go by, if the sort of emails and comments I get on Twitter and DMs I get on Twitter from various people is anything to go by, I think there's a growing audience of individuals who are dissatisfied with the kind of traditional reductionist techniques and are looking for a different approach, and I think are prepared to begin to explore in this direction. And I think as we move forward, I think we're going to start to find that this becomes the new normal. I don't know what I'm then going to start, ranting about when it is the new normal. But hey, to be honest, that's a good problem to have.
Of course. Can I go through one more thing with you?
Sure, yeah.
Before we leave it. So basically, the last day of our camps, all right, we call tournament day. Mm-hmm. And I've heard you speak with others regarding match attacks cards before.
Yeah.
And basically, we use those trading cards to create a different scoring system for our tournaments. So what we do is the team will pick a card. You'll play a 7-minute game, right? You'll pick a card. If you get, as an example, I don't know, Mo Salah, and he's got 98 attack and 30 defense, because obviously you've got your attacking score and your defensive score on the cards. What we say is, if you win the game and you score more than 2 goals, you get your attacking score. So instead of giving them 90 points, because that'd be crazy, we'd give them 9. If you win the game and concede less than 2, you get your defensive score.
Yeah.
With me?
Yeah.
Right. So it might be that you win 3-0 and you get your attacking score and your defensive score.
Yeah.
Next round of games, when you change your card, you might then get a defender.
Yeah.
So it could be that actually, God, we can't win this game 3-0. And there's more points for the defending score this time. So what we'll try and do is we'll play differently based on the card that we've got in front of us.
Yeah, brilliant. Love it, yeah.
So then what we get is we'll get like a team going all out attack and another team trying to defend. And then the next game, it'll be totally different. So even though it's a tournament, and then every team adds all their points up throughout the day, and then we see who's got the most points at the end of the day, we bring in a transfer window where they can use their points to buy players from other teams.
I love it.
Set their own values. And it's incredible seeing them all set their values. Some are clever and they go, I'm the best player on my team and this team aren't doing very well, so I'm worth 1 million. Because what we say is a point is worth 1 million. And then the team goes, oh, we want him. How much is he worth? Oh, he's only 1 million. Oh, brilliant. Have a point. We'll have him. So they can get clever with it. But on the whole, they go, right, the best player that they think is in their team is worth 10 million. We give them a cap of 10 million. We say no more than 10, because otherwise it gets a bit crazy. And that can take 15 minutes to do a transfer window. But the social kind of interactions within that and those kind of thought processes of, you're worth 10 million, why are you worth 10 million? How do I deal with being the least valuable player within my team? How do I deal with being the most valuable player within my team?
Yeah.
Do we then decide that we do want to buy the most valuable player and give them 10 million pounds, which puts them above us in terms of points, because we've then lost 10 points and they've gained 10 points. So they're then beating us. And the team with the most points at the end of the day win the game.
Yeah.
So there's loads of stuff going on in that. There's other tactics cards within there, and we use them to give extra points. And there's a possession one, for example. If their team have got the ball, at the end of the game, they get a bonus 5 points. So then, it's about a time erosion thing. It's a bit more about possession.
Mm.
And we just and every time we play it, it seems to evolve and change. And the kids will come up with new rules and they'll ask different questions that we maybe haven't thought of. And so we'll pose them and we'll think, well, how can we do that better? And the game really over the last we've been playing it about 2.5 years, has just developed from just having the card with the 2 scores to this whole kind of immersive environment on the last day of the course.
Yeah.
And we get kids come first day, can we play the match stats game? Can we play the trading card game? Just because there's so much in it.
Yeah.
And again, that is not techniques. That is not different types of coaching. That is literally, right, here's an environment. They may never be in an environment where they are worth money, where they are a commodity to their team. That's like something that we're almost like providing them on that day. And I've just seen it work really, really well, and everybody seems to really enjoy it. And we do it for 4.5 hours on the last day. We have a half-hour lunch break. The rest of the day is that.
Yeah.
And they will literally play it all day.
Yeah.
Without any kind of grumble, anything. They absolutely love it. I just wonder what your thoughts were on that being like a non-traditional way to run a tournament, because what we want to do is kind of roll that out as bring local clubs in, grassroots clubs in to a facility or schools, and then run a tournament in that way. And without people seeing it and seeing what the kids are like and how they respond to the game. And the first round of games, half of them don't get what they're doing unless they've played it before.
Yeah.
And then by the time we've changed the card, and by the time we've had a chat about, okay, so what difference does which card you get make to how you play and what you do? And then sometimes kids will just get it. They'll be like, oh, brilliant, I've got an attacker. Let's go and score loads of goals and win the game. Amazing. But some of them won't necessarily get it. And to see the kids explaining to each other how it works, and then to see them by the end of the day knowing every rule, the transfer windows are quick and snappy, the changing cards are quick and snappy, they're playing different styles of football based on the card they've got, is incredible. But I don't really know how to get that message out without them seeing a whole day of it and seeing the journey that the kids go on from us explaining the initial rules to how they are at the end of the day.
Did you see the poster that went out on Twitter recently? It's a rugby one, the cards tournament that they're organising.
I saw it, but I didn't really see too much detail on it.
Well, I think it's very similar to what you're talking about. Basically, what they're proposing is they're running a tournament. I think it's a sevens tournament. And they're basically running it aligned to England Rugby's sort of cards philosophy, this creative, aware, resilient decision makers that self-organise. So the rules of the tournament are coaches aren't allowed to intervene during games. They're not allowed to intervene at half time. The players have to do their self-reviews and everything else. They can obviously do it after the games and these are the other, but the idea is that the kids are basically running it themselves. There's rules about what coaches can and can't do in terms of, or what people can do in terms of the way that they interact with the players during the games. Then there's additional rules related to the game itself in terms of how people score and all those sorts of things. It's not quite what you're talking about, but it's very similar. And what they've done is they've articulated it and they've sort of put it out as this poster. And I think it seems to have gone, I don't think it's mega viral, it's gone a bit viral. And people have really caught on to it and said, yeah, this is great, this is a great idea. So I would say that maybe if you could, I know it's hard to articulate on paper, you have to experience it, but if you could find a way of articulating it almost to say, I think it'd be, almost like a great thing to, I guess, to sort of advertise a little bit about what inclusion coaching is all about. There's one thing that's just rattling around in the back of my mind that I need to just get off my chest as well, though, is how do you manage the whole, when you come to the transfers, that whole aspect of, because it feels a bit to me like the old schoolyard picking teams piece. So how do you manage that bit from a kind of inclusion perspective?
So what we do is we say nobody can be worth more than 10 million. Mm-hmm. So what most people do is go 10, 9, 8, 7 like that. Right. And what you'll find is the teams that are winning and have got the most points might not be buying the most expensive players.
Okay.
So then a player that is in a team...
Because they use up too many points in order to make the purchase.
Sorry?
Because they use up too many points in order to make the player purchase. Yeah.
And they don't want to use their points because they're winning the tournament.
Yeah.
So what you might find is a player that's playing in a team that are, I don't know, losing, coming last or second last or whatever, and they're what they've deemed least valuable player might then end up on the best team that are winning and end up playing with and against different people from different schools that they've not played with before, because obviously it's an environment where anybody can come to it, from different clubs. We find that what we try to do as much as we can on that tournament day is mix all the ages together. So then you've got younger ones playing with older ones. You've got people helping other people. And then, as I said, maybe some of the what would be seen as potentially weaker players could end up on the team that wins the tournament. And some of the stronger players, the teams that are at the bottom of the point system, may purchase one of the better players. And then they may end up with a strong team. And then in the second half of the tournament, or following that transfer window, they may go from the bottom of the league towards the top of the league. So, yeah, and I think that it's really interesting to see how they communicate when they're coming up with their values. I do think there's a lot in them coming up with the values rather than us doing it.
I suppose the only downside there, though, is essentially your peers have determined that you're one of the weaker players, and what that does from a kind of sort of perception perspective for that individual.
Of course.
I'm just wondering whether I would be tempted, I suppose, from my perspective, I would be tempted to sort of maybe do it in a what's the word I'm looking for? Blind auction kind of way.
Okay.
So it's not overt as to what they're getting, if you like. So they might just put a bid in, and then they're going to get something out of that blind auction, so that they have to sort of guess as to how many points they want to put forward, and they're not quite sure what player they're going to get, and then potentially then that would put you in the brace of swapping players, but the players themselves wouldn't necessarily know why that player has been swapped. So that way they're not. I mean, I don't know. It can work both ways. I mean, there are arguments either way. I'm just sort of trying to explore different ways of doing it, I suppose.
Cool. I've not seen in the 2.5 years we've been doing it any instances where usually what will happen is that the rationale the older ones will come up with is I'm older, so I'm worth more.
Oh, you've got multiple ages. I forget that. Yeah. Okay.
So we've got we had to split it last time because we had such a big range. But we'll have maybe 5 to 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds, all within the same tournament. Yeah. So the way that the older ones are justifying it is, well, I'm the oldest, so I'm worth the most money.
Oh, that makes more sense because kids will much more accept that the older equals better.
Whereas when it's in the older group, so from your 12s up to sort of 15, 16s, they then start to be a bit more thoughtful about, well, actually, he's really good. And it might not be that the older one is worth the most money.
Yeah.
It might be that within the team, they've decided as a group, actually, that player's really good. And obviously at that older age group, we then challenge those children to understand kind of almost, how do you deal with that? That's your situation right now. How do you deal with the fact that your peers think that for whatever reason, they're worth more than you in terms of this game?
Yeah.
And what can you do to show them that actually you should be worth more?
Yeah.
And then maybe that player changes team and suddenly he goes from being the least valuable player in the team to one of the most valuable players, because going from one team to another means different players, different children, and different characters within the groups. So socially, I think there's a lot. It's quite rich there.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, we're there as coaches and we manage it, and we, try to make sure that one team isn't just buying all the players, and you know what I mean. So we keep the teams fair. We try to say that a player can only be transferred once in the whole day. So if they've been transferred, they've then got to find somebody else to transfer.
And if a team puts in a transfer request for a player, that team has to release them, does it?
We've played with them saying no and going back with counter offers. As fun as that was, that took forever.
I bet it did.
So we want to get them playing football, because as great as the social stuff is, they're there to play football. So we've kind of got to the point where we say, look, you've agreed your values. So if that team decide that they think that you're worth the value that you've given for yourself, then they'll give you the money. If not, they'll turn it down and they'll look for someone else.
Okay.
So I mean, those players have decided their values, and then the team go, how much are you worth? And they go, oh, I'm worth 10. Okay, we don't want to spend 10. How much are you worth? Oh, I'm worth 5. Right, we'll have you.
Yeah.
And then they give 5, and then they get that player, and then that player's on one of the better teams and getting a lot more success. And, so that in one day, a player can be on 2 different teams. They can have 5, 6, 7 different cards, so different ways of playing. And then that way as well, with the cards, you see different things from different players in different games. Yeah. So when they've got an attacking card, the attacking players will come to life.
Yeah, got it.
And then when there's a defensive card, those other players then have an opportunity, those defensive players, to show what they can do.
Yeah.
So there's lots. I mean, it's so complex. Like when we go through the rules, you can see the kids going, what, and we're like, right, you play. And so we just give them the basic rules. Now we've decided to start off. Here's a card. Here's your scores. Have a little chat about how you might play with that card. Let's go and play. And then we play. And then between each round of games, we'll add a little bit more in and a little bit more in. So that it's not just, here's a load of information, go and process that and go and play. We kind of drip the information in throughout the day.
Brilliant. I love it. I mean, I think it would be the sort of thing that I would love to do. I'd love to play that myself. I think it would be absolutely fascinating. It would be completely absorbing. You would be, the tactical dimensions, and like you say, the amount of communication and connectivity that the players must go through in the breaks in order to try and find the better way of them solving the problem. I mean, I'd be genuinely tempted just to do that all season long, if I'm honest, because I think it would be just so amazingly absorbing. And come back to that point, I don't know if you heard Jack Walton's podcast with Amy Price, where she talks about video games.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to speak to Amy shortly on this show as well, because I'd like to explore in more detail as well what the stuff she does. But it definitely feels to me like that's like a really rich video game landscape that those kids just get absolutely lost within.
They really do.
Mm.
They really do. Even people that haven't played it before, within 2 matches, they're only 7 or 8 minutes.
Well, I've got the last session of the season coming up for my under 8s and under 10s group, and we were going to do a little tournament for them. So you've just given me all I need to make that tournament really absorbing for the last one.
What I have done, I've created a document on the tournament.
Brilliant.
Rules and some A4 poster type things that you can put out that have just got like the basic rules. More than happy to send that across to you.
Is that downloadable from Inclusion? Can people get that from the website? No. Okay.
I'd need to send it to you directly. If
you send it to me, then yeah, I can post it in the members area of the website if you're happy to share that with people.
Yeah, that's fine.
Awesome. All right. Well, Steve, like I say, fantastic conversation. Gone at it for an hour and 40 minutes or thereabouts. So amazing how quickly we can. The time can go when we're getting passionate about what we do. Listen, I mentioned Inclusion several times, but if people are more interested and want to get in touch with you, what's the best means by which they can ask to find out more or request the tournament ideas directly? Whatever. I'm pretty sure you'll be in demand.
I hope so. Twitter's probably the best. Yeah. I'm on all the time, as you've seen, and that's at Inclusion Footy 1. Yeah, that's probably the best bet.
Okay.
It's easy just to go with the one. I mean, we've got a Facebook page as well. We've got Instagram. I've got my email, which is just inclusioncoaching@gmail.com. But Twitter's probably your best bet because I'm on it on the go, and
Yeah, you're often stimulating debates on there, so you can always be found having deep in conversation with somebody. Listen, appreciate your time. Been a really great conversation. As always, I've learned a lot, and I appreciate your patience, as I said before. And like I said earlier, keep fighting a good fight.
Deep stuff. Thanks, Stuart.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.
So there you have it. Really enjoyed Steve's conversation. Thanks a lot for coming on, Steve. Really insightful and actually testament to your resilience. There's quite a difficult time that you've had there, but going back, that's probably made you who you are. So often, these sorts of challenges and tests can often be defining. So a lot to learn from there, I think. this whole perception of non-coaching, I think, is a challenge that many of us face. It's certainly something that keeps coming up when I'm talking to coaches, and I do think we've got quite a job to do to sell our methodology and also make sure that learning is taking place. That's a big takeaway for me. Let's make sure that people around us understand what's going on, and also really make it clear to them how things are working, and start to actually be able to show where the start point was and the end point was, and where people are moving towards and how they're developing. Really big one for me on that one. A big thank you to Scott McKenzie, who joined on the conclave. You're a hero, Scott, and it was good chatting to you the other night when we had a really, really interesting conversation about lots of things to do with the ecological approach. Anyway, in the meantime, enjoy your coaching, and I'll see you next week.